In the darkest chapters of human history, some names become symbols of evil. They're reminders of what happens when ideology poisons science, when power corrupts, and when the line between a healer and a murderer simply vanishes. In the hell that was the Auschwitz-Birkenau concentration camp, one figure stood out. A man whose presence on the selection ramp meant the difference between a few more wretched breaths and immediate, terrifying death. He was a doctor who swore an oath to do no harm, but instead dedicated himself to perfecting human suffering. With the power to decide life or death with a flick of his wrist, one SS physician at Auschwitz became the ultimate symbol of horror. They called him the Angel of Death. But how does a man with a promising medical career become one of history's most infamous war criminals? And how did he manage to get away with it? This is the story of Josef Mengele. The making of a monster. To understand the monster, you have to look at the man. Josef Mengele wasn't born in the shadows. He was a product of a respectable, wealthy family in Günzburg, Bavaria. Born on March 16, 1911, he was the eldest son of Karl and Walburga Mengele, owners of a successful company that made farm machinery. Raised in a devout Catholic home, he had all the privileges of wealth and status. He was intelligent, popular, and ambitious. Old friends remembered him as well-regarded, if a bit spoiled. His father even bought him a car for university, a rare luxury that set him apart. But Mengele's ambitions went far beyond the family business. He was drawn to academia, specifically medicine and the new field of racial anthropology. He studied philosophy and medicine at the University of Munich, the very birthplace of the Nazi Party. It was here, in the politically charged 1930s, that Mengele became immersed in the toxic racial theories that were gaining traction in German academic circles. He got involved with right-wing nationalist groups which promoted the lie that Germany's struggles were the fault of its Jewish citizens. His academic path and political beliefs began to merge. In 1935, he earned his PhD in anthropology with a dissertation on the racial differences in jaw structures. He followed that with a medical degree in 1938 from the University of Frankfurt. During this time, his fate was sealed. He became an assistant to Dr. Ottmar von Verschuer, a leading geneticist at the Institute for Hereditary Biology and Racial Hygiene. Verschuer was obsessed with twin studies as a way to unlock the secrets of heredity and, in his view, prove the tenets of Nazi racial purity. Mengele, his eager protégé, absorbed these ideas completely. In 1937, he joined the Nazi Party. A year later, he was in the SS. These weren't the actions of a reluctant follower, he was a true believer. When World War II broke out, Mengele served as a battalion medical officer. He was wounded in combat on the Eastern Front and decorated for bravery, earning the Iron Cross first and second class. Deemed unfit for more fighting, he wasn't sent home. Instead, his background in medicine and his zealous commitment to racial science made him the perfect candidate for a different kind of war. His mentor, Verschuer, likely helped arrange his next post. In May 1943, SS Hauptsturmführer Josef Mengele was transferred to a place that would be forever linked with his name: Auschwitz. He had found his laboratory. The Angel of Death, Auschwitz-Birkenau, was a factory of death, designed for the systematic murder of millions. When Josef Mengele arrived on May 30th, 1943, he didn't see a place of horror. He saw an unprecedented opportunity. Here was a limitless supply of human subjects, a population entirely at his mercy, where the rules of medical ethics weren't just ignored, they were inverted. His most visible role, and the origin of his nickname, was on the Judenrampe, the railway platform where cattle cars unloaded their human cargo. Day and night transports arrived. Amidst the chaos, the screaming and the barking dogs, Mengele would preside over the selection. With an elegant flick of his white-gloved hand or a casual wave of his riding crop, he passed judgment. Left meant forced labour, a temporary reprieve that usually ended in death from starvation or disease. Right meant a direct path to the gas chambers. He performed this duty with a chillingly detached air, sometimes whistling an opera tune, his handsome features and perfect uniform a bizarre contrast to the horror he was directing. To the terrified prisoners, he seemed like some sort of dark angel deciding their fate, and so they called him the Angel of Death. But selections were only part of his work. Mengele became the chief physician of the gypsy camp at Birkenau, where thousands of Roma and Sinti families were imprisoned. This gave him the freedom to begin his research. His work at Auschwitz was done in collaboration with his former mentor's institute back in Germany. Mengele meticulously collected and sent samples back to his colleagues: blood, organs, skeletons, and even whole fetuses, all harvested from his victims. His research revolved around the Nazi obsession with genetics and racial purity, but he was notoriously obsessed with twins. He saw them as a perfect natural experiment. The Mengele twins, as they became known, were often children. They were housed in special barracks, allowed to keep their clothes and hair, and given a temporary stay of execution. But this small mercy was just a prelude to unimaginable suffering. Survivors describe his horrifying methods. The twins were subjected to endless measurements. He would draw large quantities of blood from one twin and inject it into the other to see what happened. He injected them with diseases like typhus to see if they reacted identically. In one of his most infamous experiments, he tried to change children's eye color by injecting chemicals directly into their irises. The procedure was agonizing and resulted in infections and blindness. It never worked. When one twin died from an experiment, Mengele's protocol was absolute. The other was killed immediately with an injection of phenol to the heart so he could perform comparative autopsies. To Mengele, these children weren't human, they were data. He was also fascinated by physical abnormalities, seeking out people with dwarfism or gigantism. He studied the Auschwitz family, a family of dwarfs who were performers. They were subjected to humiliating and painful examinations, but they miraculously survived, partly because Mengele wanted to keep his collection of unique subjects alive. Others weren't so lucky. Many were killed so their skeletons could be sent to museums in Germany as examples of degenerate anatomy. What Mengele did wasn't science. It was a grotesque perversion of research driven by a fanatical ideology. He acted with total impunity. In one instance, to combat a typhus outbreak in a women's barrack, his solution wasn't treatment, but mass murder. He had the entire block of hundreds of women gassed to clear the infection. When the Red Army began its final push through Poland in January 1945, Mengele knew his time was up. Just 10 days before the camp's liberation, he packed up his notes and human specimens and fled. He left behind a legacy of torment and a name that would forever symbolize the ultimate betrayal of a doctor's oath: the Great Escape. As the Third Reich crumbled in 1945, high-ranking Nazis were either captured, committed suicide, or tried to vanish. Josef Mengele, one of the most wanted men in the world, did what so many others couldn't. He disappeared. His escape and the decades-long manhunt for him would become an infuriating chapter in the history of post-war justice. After fleeing Auschwitz, Mengele put on the uniform of a regular German army soldier, a simple but effective disguise. He was captured and held in a US detention camp in mid-1945. In a staggering failure of intelligence, the Allies' disorganized wanted lists didn't flag him as a major war criminal. He also didn't have the telltale SS blood group tattoo under his arm, an omission that helped him avoid identification. He was soon released under a false name. For the next 4 years, he was a fugitive in his own country. With help from his wealthy family, he worked as a farmhand in a small Bavarian village, hiding in plain sight. But as the Nuremberg trials brought the full scope of Nazi atrocities to light, Germany was no longer safe. Believing his capture would mean a death sentence, he decided to flee Europe. In 1949, he used the rat lines, well-established escape routes for ex-Nazis, to travel from Germany to Genoa, Italy. There, with the help of sympathizers, he got a Red Cross passport under the alias Helmut Gregor. He boarded a ship to Argentina, a country that had become a safe haven for thousands of fugitive Nazis. In Buenos Aires, Mengele initially lived a surprisingly open life. His family's company funneled money to him, and by 1956, he felt secure enough to get Argentine citizenship under the name Josef Mengele. He even took a ski holiday in Switzerland and met with his son, Rolf. The audacity was breathtaking, but the net was slowly closing. West German prosecutors, pushed by survivors and Nazi hunters like Simon Wiesenthal, had issued an arrest warrant. When Mengele learned they knew he was in Argentina, he fled again in 1959, this time to Paraguay, where he easily got citizenship. The next year, 1960, brought the most dramatic near miss of the manhunt. Agents from Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, successfully located and abducted Adolf Eichmann in Buenos Aires. The Mossad director, Isa Harel, was determined to get Mengele next and had intelligence on his whereabouts. But the political fallout from the Eichmann capture was huge, and the leadership decided to prioritize bringing one major Nazi to trial rather than risk a second, more complex operation. Mengele slipped through their fingers. Spooked by Eichmann's capture, Mengele fled to Brazil. He spent the final 2 decades of his life in and around São Paulo, protected by a small network of Nazi sympathizers, most notably Wolfram and Lisolette Bosser. He lived under the alias Wolfgang Gerhard, a name borrowed from another former Nazi. His life became one of paranoia and isolation. He moved from house to house, living on farms and in quiet suburbs, constantly afraid of being discovered. The Angel of Death, who once held power over hundreds of thousands, was now a pathetic, hunted old man, terrified of every stranger. But he would never be found. Justice would never have its day in court. The final judgment. Josef Mengele's final years weren't spent in a prison cell. They were spent in hiding, a shadow living under a false name, consumed by fear. The man who showed no mercy was granted decades of freedom. A bitter end for his millions of victims and the survivors who desperately wanted justice. His death came not from a court sentence, but with the quiet indifference of nature. On February 7, 1979, while on vacation with the Bosser family in Bertioga, Brazil, the 67-year-old Mengele went for a swim in the ocean. While in the water, he suffered a massive stroke. He drowned before his friends could pull him from the waves. There was no confession, no words of remorse, just a sudden, inglorious end. To keep the secret, the Bosserts buried him in a cemetery near São Paulo under his false name, Wolfgang Gerhard. For 6 long years, the world hunted for a man who was already dead. His family in Germany kept the secret, while Nazi hunters followed false leads across South America. The breakthrough finally came in 1985. Acting on a tip, German police raided the home of a family friend in Günzburg and discovered letters from the Bosserts in Brazil. The correspondence mentioned the death of their friend Wolfgang, whose details matched Mengele's. This information was passed to Brazilian police, who found the Bosserts. Under questioning, they confessed everything and led investigators to the modest grave in the Embu das Arte cemetery. On June 6, 1985, the grave was exhumed. An international team of forensic experts from Brazil, West Germany, and the United States was assembled to examine the skeleton. The evidence began to line up. The skeleton had features consistent with Mengele's known medical history, like a fractured pelvis from a motorcycle accident in Auschwitz. Ultimately, the strongest proof came from matching the skull's teeth to his old dental records. In 1985, the team announced with high certainty that the remains were Josef Mengele's. The final definitive confirmation came in 1992, when DNA from the bones was matched with a blood sample from his son, Rolf. The case was closed. The Angel of Death was dead. Conclusion. The discovery of Mengele's remains brought a strange and unsatisfying kind of closure. He had escaped capture for 34 years, dying a free man. He was never forced to answer for his crimes, never made to confront his victims in a court of law. His escape is a stark symbol of the failures of post-war justice, and a painful reminder that even the most monstrous criminals can slip away. The story of Josef Mengele is a warning about the corruption of science, the danger of ideology, and the terrifying capacity for human evil. His name is now a byword for medical atrocity. After being identified, his skeleton was sent to São Paulo's Institute for Forensic Medicine, where it has been used as a teaching aid for a new generation of forensic students. His physical remains may be an academic tool, but his true legacy is the scar he left on history and the duty he imposed on all of us. The duty to remember the victims, to remember how a healer became a killer, and to ensure the darkness that created the Angel of Death is never allowed to rise again. For more stories from the darkest chapters of history, subscribe to our channel.